I do it for the love, yes I do. So you don't care about the money, well yes it's true. And I'm so blessed to be fulfilling my destiny. All material things could mean less to me. Only thing I ever could need is a therapy sample with a dope ass beat. And get the mic check, all the levels right. And if it's good then I'll be there for several nights. Cause the only thing I need is a strong supporting team. The most important thing that helps supporting my dream. And I can't forget my family, helping keep my sanity. No matter what I do, I know they'll always stand for me. No matter what I do, I know they'll always stand for me. Yeah, I do exactly. That's all I know. Dodge the difficulties and take life slow. And if I ever slow up, you know I always show up. It's still the same on me, even if I blow up. Love is what I do it for. Love what I'm rapping. Love is the main reason for how all this happened. Love for all my fans, love for all the shows. Got love for all my memories, no matter where I go. Even if I'm out to nothing, I know there's always something. It's not a fitness test, but it'll always keep me running. One good thing about music, when it hits you feel no pain. So I keep it close to me, make sure it never goes away. From the start, I knew it in my heart. If I make one person happy, then I know I did my part. Now, if I stay into it, when people dig the music I put on for my cities, and know I always do it for love. Yeah. Put on for my cities, and know I always do it for love. I do it for love. What you do it for? I do it for love. For love, for love, for love, for love. I do it 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 for love. I say it for love. I do it for love.
I wanna live forever. I wanna be your friend. I wanna rule together. I wanna be your pet. I wanna make some money. I wanna waste some time. I wanna be your buddy. Oh honey, this world is mine. This world is mine. I'm stuck on a loop and I can't vacate. Truth is I can't stay safe. Ready to be free of this pain and I can't wait. I can't do right or do wrong. Keep quiet or retire or be cool and move on. Don't want it inside or right. Wanna eat till I'm green, living clean with a diet, no. Fuck's given, reached an all-time low. Feet don't fail me now, I just wanna go. The beating's over. I never felt so alone. Oh, CP culture. Why do I feel so low? Oh, sticks and stones and broken bones are involved. I don't know any better. I wanna live forever. I wanna be your friend. I wanna rule together. I wanna be your pet. I wanna make some money. I wanna waste some time. I wanna be your buddy. Oh honey, this world is mine. This world is mine. Take me away, cause I don't wanna wait. See another day. Straight jacket, the chain, don't mind either way. vanity, so close to insanity. Isn't me, couldn't be, I'm too young and pretty. The meeting's over, I never felt so alone. Oh, keep me closer, don't wanna feel so cold. Oh, sticks and stones and broken bones are involved. I don't know any better. I wanna live forever. I wanna be your friend. I wanna rule together. I wanna be your pet. I wanna make some money, money, money. I wanna waste some time. I wanna be your buddy, but honey, this world is mine. I wanna live forever. I wanna be spared. I wanna be better. Don't wanna be scared. This world. I wanna live forever.
Something like this, here we go. I ain't got nothing but a little song, a little tune to play, make a good time roll. No, I ain't got nothing but a bag of green, 2 dancing shoes, and my friends with me. Well, I ain't got nothing but a little song, a little tune to play, make a good time roll. No, I ain't got nothing but a bag of green, 2 dancing shoes, and my friends with me. Here we go. Na 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 na. Here we go. Na 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 na. Here we go, 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 go. Don't that feel real funky, y'all? But I think I'm gonna need a little help from the horn section. Is that all right? Yeah. And that goes a little something like this. Here we go. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Here we go. Na 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 na. And it goes a little something like this. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. I'm sorry. Here we go.
Here we go. Look, I just smoked the whole other joint. After listening to that shit.
Imagine me and you, I think about you day and night. It's only right to think about the girl you love and hold her tight. So happy together. If I should call you up, invest a dime, and you say you belong to me and ease my mind. Imagine how the world could be so very fine, so happy together. I can't see me loving nobody but you for all my life. When you're with me, baby, the skies will be blue for all my life. Me and you and me, no matter how they toss the dice, it had to be. The only one for me is you, and you for me, so happy together. I can't see me loving nobody but you for all my life. When you're with me, baby, the skies will be blue for all my life. Me and you and me, no matter how they toss the dice, it had to be. The only one for me is you, and you for me, so happy together. Toss the dice, it had to be. The only one for me is you, and you for me, so happy together, so happy together. How is the weather? So happy together, we're happy together.
Hey everyone, welcome to our second event. Thank you all for attending today. We've got some really exciting stuff to talk about. And welcome back to the core team. If you guys want to introduce yourselves again in case people forgot.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt. I'm studying design and I am here to rep Team KitKat. Woo!
Hi everyone, I'm Rose and I'm a second year computer science student and Team Oreo all the way.
Really? Or Really might be gone. Hafisa?
Hi everyone, I'm Hafiza. Nice to see you all again. And Team Marshmallow, good luck.
Cool. So we have a really exciting event planned, but we've got a few things to go through before we start. So let's just get that out of the way. Now, as you all remember from our last event, we have some rules that we need to adhere by. So they're very simple. They're just basic rules. First of all, be nice to each other, be excellent, treat everyone with respect. Everyone here doesn't deserve to go through harassment, discrimination, or anything else. So make sure you're kind to everyone. If you do see something happen, please let us know. We have an email address at the bottom of the screen right now. Send us an email. And, you know, practice saying yes and when someone says something, not yes, but. It's always a great way to build ideas. Also today, we will be doing the same as we did last time and be asking for your feedback at the end of the event. And you'll be seeing secret words throughout the event. And you'll need to put that onto your feedback form to let us know how you felt the event went. So last time in our event, we had an amazing reaction. You guys were absolutely amazing. I think the whole core team can agree. We had a lot of fun last time with the introduction event. And there were a few things that you asked from us. So we delivered. One of the biggest things that you asked for was a massive group chat of all of you. And we have delivered. We did post this on our Instagram a few days after our event so that you guys know. But if you don't follow it, there's the Instagram QR code in the corner. But we do now have a WhatsApp group chat. You're able to scan this QR code. You can join with that link as well. We post all our events that were coming up on there very early. If you guys have any questions you want to ask us, you'll probably get a response within at least an hour from one of the core team. And we like to have a bit of a few Oreo, Kit Kat, marshmallow jokes going on with the teams. So yeah. And at the end of the event today, we have a really nice big surprise that we can't wait to let you guys know about. And I think you all are going to really enjoy it because it was highly requested before. Now, due to COVID-19, we obviously can't do in-person events, but that's opened up a lot more for us to do. So today we have a really exciting guest speaker all the way from Silicon Valley in California, United States. This is very hard to get if we were running in-person events. So technically COVID-19 helped us out here. So we have Mark Striebeck, who is an engineering director at Google. Now, the rest of the core team and myself, we had a chat with Mark a few days ago. And yeah, so Mark's an ex-Brunel alum. He did his master's in numerical maths in 1991 to 1992. And then he joined Google in 2005, and he's worked across multiple different products. And he's currently an engineering director on a Google research project using AI in finance. He's going to tell you all about it in a bit. So I'm going to invite Mark to the stage right now. We're going to have a quick chat before he starts. So, hey, Mark.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hey, ooh, there we go. Perfect. How are you?
Tired.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Mark, like I said, is in Silicon Valley. So it's 7 a.m. right now where he is. So he's up extremely early to give a talk to us. But yeah, Mark, is there anything I missed out that you want to let people know about you? Sorry if I missed anything out.
No, I think, again, you set the minimum, and then, I mean, most of my talk is about my life. So after this, you all will know much more than you ever wanted about me.
Cool. So I have a few questions I wanted to ask before. So obviously you went to Brunel. What would you say was your favorite part of studying at Brunel?
I think two things. One was, so when I came to Brunel, I lived in Hanover, Germany. Hanover, Germany is one of the most boring towns in Germany. So being in London was just the most exciting thing. And it's really one of the main things that I remember. Like I used to like and still like jazz music. So going to clubs a lot. And as you know, like the drive from all the way out Brunel to downtown London, it's not the easiest, but we did 3 or 4 times a week. That was one thing. The other thing that I really, really liked, in Germany, university can be quite often very theoretical. And the University of Hanover, in particular, the computer science program, there is no exception. So I really liked being at Brunel, where people so much focus on application, and it guided sort of everything, even the theoretical parts. And it was something that was totally new to me and that I really, really enjoyed. And that sort of showed me that's the stuff that I actually like about mathematics and computer science to apply it, not so much studying the theory of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, or in computer science, so a few of us here study computer science. I feel like they've kept that up. Matt's spoken to me about engineering, we said about maths. I think Brunel has always been more of a practical applying their knowledge rather than just sitting in a lecture and studying it. We've always still got that spirit, which which I'm glad. And today I think we have people from all different disciplines attending. The people in DSC, people do engineering. Majority are computer science, but I think they'd all agree that to this day we don't really, we still study the theory, but we're all about actually getting hands-on and making stuff basically.
Nice.
So great. Well, we're a bit early, but if you're ready, you can start your talk if you want.
Up to you. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So if you want to share your screen, I can get that set up.
Yeah. What was it here? Screen. Okay.
Cool. Perfect. Take it away.
Okay, well, as you can see, I finished my slides really early in the morning because I still have the YouTube live in 4 hours link down here. So yeah, what I want to do is in this, in the next, I think 45 minutes or so, sort of walk you through it a little bit, how I ended up at Google at the position that I am. I get this question a lot. How does one become an engineering director, an engineering lead at a company like Google? And to take it right from the beginnings, like, there was no intent. I never studied math and computer science to end up in Silicon Valley at this company. And you'll see it throughout my life that a lot of things just sort of happened based on decisions that I made, not based on a grand plan. And so at the beginning, as I said, I grew up in Hanover, was born there, went to school there, went to university there. And then the first, I mean, really big thing in my life was really, oops, what is here? Actually studying in London, studying at Brunel. And this is a photo of a book that one of my friends that I studied there with made. He's a great photographer, so he took lots and lots of photos while we were there. And he actually sold a couple of these photos to magazines because we went, as I said, to many concerts. And these are 3 photos that I so remember from the time. Ronnie Scott's, we went there a lot. I think today it's a little bit more touristy than it was at the time, but also to many other jazz clubs. And then the other thing on the right-hand side, the Bar Italia, I think it's still there in Frith Street, near Leicester Square. At the time, there was still the, like you couldn't, like pubs had to close fairly early. So the Bar Italia was usually the place where we could go after a concert. And as I said, that was for me really one of the main things I remember, despite studying there and learning a lot of things, was really, again, being away from my hometown, being away from my country, being in a completely new environment, having to learn a new language, being in a new culture. I mean, the UK and Germany are similar, but also quite different. And it really showed me how much I liked that, how much I like to be somewhere else, how much I like to learn new things, how much I enjoy learning and immersing myself in different cultures. And as I said, what we did in the end is we spent, I mean, the first, I'm pretty sure it's still the same that the master's year was, the first 6 months was basically lectures, but then the second 6 months was just writing the master's thesis. And I remember that time, it was super, super busy. We all spent a lot of time working on our master's thesis. I did my master's thesis actually in collaboration with the DSLR, the German, basically the German equivalent of NASA, the German Aero and Space Technology Association. And my master's thesis was numerical methods to simulate shock waves around airfoils. And so we worked a lot during the day, and then in the evening, 3 of us who were always hanging out, we would, one of us would always make dinner for all of us. And at the end of dinner, we were always sitting around the table thinking like, okay, what can we do next? Could learn a little bit more. We could maybe go to the pub on campus, or let's check the timeout guide if something is in London. Because there's always something in London. So we ended up going to London, I would say 3 or 4 times a week. Concerts, large and small, that was the main thing. But as I said, I have this time in my memory as a time where I learned a lot. I also, again, writing the master's thesis was the first time that I had to do a really large project on my own, not by the books, just learning something and then presenting it to someone or writing a test, but doing something myself. And I also realized how much I like that process, to really have a theme, and I had to figure out what I want to write about and what I want to focus on. And sort of the research part and the learning part of this. And so this was my time in London. As I said, I had a fantastic time, came back, and within a week or two coming back to boring Hanover, I realized at some point, and at some point can't be too far away, I will have to leave Hanover. I have to go somewhere else. Like after a city like London, you can't go back to Hanover and live there. And so then I finished university then also in Germany. So I ended up basically with 2 master's degrees, one from University of Hanover, one from Brunel. Interestingly enough, at the end of that, when I was done, I couldn't find a job as a software engineer. This was a time internet took off, and internet technology and everything took off way later in Germany than anywhere else. So in '94, when I was done, I literally couldn't find a job. So I decided first, stay in university, trying to get a PhD. And so I got an assistant researcher position at the University of Göttingen, which is near Hanover, at the dental surgery, which was interesting. It was a research program where they needed somebody to write a lot of source code. As part of that, I got to attend a lot of operations, people getting their wisdom teeth extracted and all kinds of things. And at the same time, I tried to do my PhD. And after 2 years or so, I just had enough. As I said, I really like the process of learning. I really like the process. I really like being in the university, teaching, getting taught. But somehow after 2 years, I was really done with it, that I thought, okay, I need to accomplish more. I need to achieve more. And that might sound a little bit arrogant towards university, but I kind of missed any type of pressure. When you do university research, again, you have to do a lot of self-motivation to stay on target. You don't have clear milestones or really hard milestones if your research takes a little bit longer. And I realized I can't deal with that. So I wanted to get a job. And then I do remember calling my dad and telling him about that. And my dad was so happy that Mark finally wants to get a real job. And the thing that I remember, the first thing he said is, okay, meet me downtown Hanover. We're buying you a suit because you need a suit for your interviews. And again, he paid for a super nice suit, super expensive, was a 3-piece suit similar to this one. I totally remember this, that he was really happy. And then, again, I went on interviewing at various companies. And I do remember how much I actually liked that, wearing a suit, showing up. By this time, I knew a lot. So these interviews weren't fully interviews where they just asked me questions I had to answer, but I had to offer a lot. I could ask a lot of questions. I had some ideas what I wanted to do. And so I ended up at an Australian software company that had a product that was used in many banks and insurance companies in Germany and in Europe. So I ended up as a consultant for them. So in the end, I ended up not buying one, but multiple suits, because I had to be in the bank almost every day, showing up there, working. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed having a job, coming as a consultant to a bank with a lot of knowledge, working on all kinds of applications, internal bank applications, internet banking applications, learning a lot about, again, enterprise class development, learning a lot about, as you can imagine, security, SSL encryption. At the time, there weren't good libraries, so we really had to implement all of this stuff from scratch. So that was really exciting. I moved to Frankfurt. That's where the company was based then, which was also great at the time. And so worked there for a couple of years. As I said, learned a lot. Also learned at that time how much I like leading people and even managing people, or leading projects, people, and managing people. I became at some point the manager of the professional services group there. And I realized how much I like not just to work with people, but again, sitting with someone, trying to figure out what do they want to do in their career, giving them feedback on their performance, trying to put all of this into a larger context of, look, we still have to get stuff done. We have these projects. But I really liked, and I could explore it there because it was a small company. So lots and lots of room to grow. And I really grow into sort of leadership roles and, as I said, even people management roles, which I really enjoyed. And then a few years later, I had a fairly small project, actually, with a bunch of guys from this company, Arthur D. Little, consulting company. And it was a fairly small engagement, just a few weeks. But during this engagement, one of the guys took me aside and said, hey, I'm about to leave Arthur D. Little. I'm starting a startup company in Silicon Valley and in Germany. Do you want to join us? Do you want to take on the software development for this company? And this was 99, 2000, so booming internet, booming startup companies. And of course, that was for me super interesting. So I left Frankfurt. The other thing that helped us at the time, I had probably the world's worst breakup. So leaving Germany, going to a completely different country on the other side of the planet sounded really, really good. And so I then came to Silicon Valley, not really knowing what to expect. And one of the things, when you come to Silicon Valley, even if you visit, you don't even have to work here. You drive through Silicon Valley and you see these signs left and right from Google, from HP, Apple, eBay. All these companies are here. So you drive through it. And at that moment, you realize how much is happening in Silicon Valley, how many of the things that we use in our daily lives. I mean, today, even more so than at that time. I mean, now if you go up to San Francisco, you have Twitter, you have Dropbox. I mean, it's amazing how many companies are there. And that was one of the things that I realized very quickly, being in Silicon Valley, how much you are in this environment of startup companies, internet companies. People come to Silicon Valley not to get your sort of normal 9-to-5 job, not to just do something because you need a job or you need some money. In fact, cost of living here is pretty expensive. Nobody comes here to get an easy, cheap job. People come here to make a difference. People come here because they have ambitions, they have dreams, and everybody here is really, really smart. And so I do remember how much I like this environment. You go out, you hang out with some friends, they all work in their own companies. They all have their big projects, big ideas that they want to do, ideas that everybody here in Silicon Valley wants to change the world, wants to make an impact. So this was a completely new culture for me. Again, after being a consultant in German banks, being in startup culture in Silicon Valley was just amazing. I totally lived the startup dream. The company that I started with didn't survive the first year. At the same time, we actually had to apply for my visa and everything that I can even stay here. So the company went bankrupt so quickly that it wasn't clear if the visa that they applied for me and that I finally had, I could actually use with another company, because it is an H-1B company, but it can be transferred, assuming that you actually work for your first company. And I actually only worked for a few days with my visa for my company. But we figured that out. Also, around this time, or a few months before, I got to know this amazing woman who is today my wife. And so I really had a reason to stay in Silicon Valley. But yeah, after this company went bankrupt, this was then 2001. And 2001, internet bubble was over. So it wasn't any longer you could find jobs left and right. It was much, much harder. So we calculated I had enough money to stay there to stay here for 3-4 months. So we said, okay, if I find something in 3-4 months, it's awesome. Otherwise, I would have to go back to Germany. So I applied like crazy. Found another company that I then started working. Interestingly enough, my first day at work at that company was 9/11, 2001. And so I do remember driving to work for my first day of work and hearing on the radio everything about 9/11. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like the world is coming to an end and I'm driving to work. As a result, I never had to sign an NDA with that company. When I came, nobody was interested in signing NDAs or anything. But that was in a company where I learned then, because we had to write, we basically had to port a website to a packaged software that we could sell to companies. And at some point, we had to rewrite the entire site. We sort of took the existing site, packaged up a little bit, packaged up all the libraries that were in the site, but then we decided we have to completely rewrite it from scratch, otherwise it doesn't work. So we tried to do this project to rewrite something from scratch. And I don't know if it was even halfway through, a couple of months in, basically had to declare bankruptcy. Basically to say, like, look, we have no idea how far we are. we had no idea. Our product manager says, look, we don't know how to specify everything that the engineers can write this. We haven't even gone through the entire site, learning everything that there is, deciding which features we want in the new product and which features not. And I do remember sitting in this meeting with our VP of engineering, my manager at the time, 2 product managers. My manager said, okay, why don't we do an iterative process? And this was fairly new at the time. Also, nobody had any other ideas. So our VP said, like, okay, why don't you do that? So James and I, we come out of the meeting and we look at each other and we're like, what are we doing now? What's an iterative development process? And so this was then just before Christmas. He then over the Christmas break read the white book from Kent Beck, Agile Development. I read the green book from Ron Jeffries, Planning Agile Development. And we came back and we told everyone, okay, we figured it out. This is how Agile works. And we had no idea how it worked. But again, nobody had any better idea. So we just did everything. And we set up an amazingly, a great development process where we developed this website in iterations. Again, we didn't know how it worked. The good thing was we didn't question anything. We just did everything by the book. We had no way to judge, say this makes sense, this doesn't make sense. It really didn't make sense at all to me. I came from a much more sort of waterfall type methodology world, again, German banks, where you plan much more. So this iterative thing, I'm like, okay, maybe it works. And so we just went full into it, did everything that the book said, tried to apply it, ended up with a great process. So we launched in the software roughly a year later, had several releases after. And one of the main things that I remembered is that we had a few launches with literally 0 outstanding bugs, where we were able to do the development, do the QA at the end, everything so well, focusing so much on testing, test automation, that we that we could literally fix everything. In fact, I remember 1 or 2 launches where the engineering team was literally bored at the end, where our testing team did the final rounds of testing for a couple of days and they found a bug a day or something small and easy to fix. We fixed it, and we were literally sitting around, and we usually spent the time playing foosball. The other thing that Agile got me is I then started to get really interested in this type of process. So I read more about it. At some point, also started to attend conferences, and then there's always some special interest groups in Silicon Valley, so I attended those. And in one of these, I got to know this guy, Jeff Huber, who I didn't know first, but then learned very soon that he was one of the 4 VP of engineering at this company called Google. And so we got to talk a lot, and he told me at some point, look, I would love if you come to Google. So I applied to Google, and I applied to Google actually the first time in 2004. And then Google interviewed me for a tech lead position. So the interview that I got was insanely technical, and I didn't do a very good job because I didn't get a job offer. But Google said, look, if something else comes up, we will let you know. And I thought, like, okay, that's sort of the polite way of saying, like, you're out. But sure enough, roughly a year later, Google came back and says, look, we thought about it. We have another position. And what apparently happened behind the scenes that Jeff and also another engineer from my team at this company, he went to Google. They both said, like, look, we need to find something for this guy. He's a great lead. He's a great manager. So then I interviewed again, and then I came to Google. This was then in 2005. The big difference between 2004 and 2005 is Google went public in 2004. So I worked there, but I missed that part. But then I started working, and my first role at Google was in AdWords front end, the enterprise front end, where people can, again, create AdWords campaigns, upload their ads, change them, see all the reports. It's an insanely complex front end. And sort of my job was to figure out how could we apply Agile at Google. And the one thing that I learned very quickly is that you can't come to a company like Google and say, hey, I know how to do this, so let's do it differently. Again, Google at the time was already a very successful company. And so what I learned there at the beginning, which was interesting, that and I had a discussion actually with my manager at the time, and she said, like, look, we hired you because you're really good. Just do what you want to do in your projects that you're working. And if you do it well, other people will come to you and will ask you how you do this. But don't worry about a big agile adoption program or anything. Just do it. And it was it was great advice. So I did this, and exactly that happened, that I, again, worked in my projects, introduced Agile, and tried to introduce Agile. I think one of the funniest things was I tried to introduce Agile in a way that nobody knew that I was actually doing that, because I was so afraid that people said, look, we don't need this process, like, get out of here. So I do remember I had one team that I was leading where I basically introduced an entire Agile process with iterations, with retrospectives, with daily stand-ups and everything, but I made a point of calling everything something else. So we didn't have a daily stand-up, we had a daily check-in, I think I called it. And what I did is that I sort of waited until something went wrong, and then when we then talked about, okay, how can we fix this, then I introduced these practices one at a time. And daily stand-up was one of these examples where at some point we had our weekly meeting, and our QA person said, oh, I didn't really do much because I was still waiting for this functionality to be finished. And the engineer said, hey, I finished this days ago. You could have started testing days ago. And so like, hey, why don't we just make a quick checkup every day that this doesn't happen? And they were like, okay, that sounds good. So we introduced one practice at a time, always based on something went wrong or something could be done differently. And then the funniest moment was that at some point we invited Ken Schwaber, one of the two guys who invented Scrum, to give a talk at Google. And he gives this talk at Google, lays out how Scrum works, what you do and the advantages and how it worked for him in the past and everything. And when I left the room where we had this talk, the tech lead from this team, Ray, he came running over to me. He's like, man, Mark, this sounds interesting. We should totally try this. And I looked at him, I'm like, Ray, you do everything that this guy just told us. We just call it something else, but we do everything. And then he thought about it, and I'm like, yeah, we actually do. And then he looked at me, boy, it's great that it worked out this way. I'm like, look, Ray, that's what I tried to do. And so it led to me then getting involved in other projects, in other areas. And the area that we realized quickly that we needed at Google was a much better testing environment. Again, one thing about Google is that you probably know, Google has one open, gigantic repository for all the source code. All this, if you build something, you can build it down to all the underlying components. And we always build from head. We like nobody has a branch where you then release from, and then you sort of go back to the main branch. But you always release from head, which means if you make a change in AdWords, and somebody 10 minutes later builds the next binary for Gmail and launches Gmail, they get your latest change in automatically. So we needed to do a much, much better job in testing, and we didn't have the right testing tools. And so out of this work, we then decided we have to do this better. We have to write more testable code, and we have to get better testing tools. And so then I decided, okay, maybe I want to take this on. And then I went back to actually Jeff. He was still in charge of AdWords at the time. And I talked to him about it, and I sort of tried to explain to him, as like, look, I'm working on AdWords. Again, the most important project for Google at the time, next to search. And I want to switch into internal testing tools and infrastructure. And it just sounded like a really bad career move to go from something so visible, so successful, to something internal. And Jeff did this amazing thing that he listened to me. And then at the end, he asked me a question that I was not prepared for, that he said, okay, what are you actually doing outside of work? And I was like, well, I like snowboarding, a couple of other things. I'm like, no, and anything work-related that you do. And then I said, like, oh yeah, like still like the Agile stuff. I still went to conferences, gave presentations at conferences, Agile in general, Agile at Google, and talked about that. And then he looked at me at some point and said, okay, you really don't care about online advertising. And again, working on AdWords, my first instinct was to defend myself. But then I had to admit, it's like, no, you're right, I actually don't. And he's like, well, I think there you have your answer. He says, like, at Google, one of the most important things is that we find positions for everyone where people feel very strong and passionate about what they're doing. That's when people not just do a good job, and he says, if you stay here, you will do a good job. You are doing a good job right now. You will continue to do a good job. But if you do a good job at a company like Google, you're just average. Everybody's doing a good job. If you really want to stand out, you have to do an amazing job. And he says, like, this sounds like something you're really passionate about. You have lots of ideas. You will do an amazing job there. And so I did that, left Edwards, went to our internal testing tools department, and I think it's right. I did an amazing job there. The testing tools that we built at the time, we still use today. And the main thing was really this continuous integration system across the entire company, where today, if you check in something into our storage systems, Bigtable or Spanner, you will know a few minutes later if you broke something in Gmail because of that check-in. And it works across all the products that we have. We even integrate, to some degree, our Android code. We definitely integrate all the mobile front ends that we have. And so this became one of the biggest things that I've probably built in my life, this entire suite of systems that culminated in this continuous integration system that completely changed how people develop code and how people wrote tests. But then I also realized at some point, we rolled this out, and again, it changed things. And at that moment, I realized I don't want my career and my job to be testing. I actually wanted to be about software engineering. So soon after we actually rolled it out, and went then to work on Gmail. Just because, again, I felt I don't want to be sort of holed into testing, test automation, as exciting as it was. I didn't want that to be my career. But the other thing that happened at the same time, which was also really important, is, again, I told you, like, I had a wife. We had our 2 kids. And this really changed a lot for me. Much, I mean, of course, if you have kids, that changes a lot in your life. But it changes it in a way that you're not prepared for. How can you be? Like, it's something that you never had before. And for me, it changed really not only how I sort of balanced work and non-work time, but also how I worked. What I did a lot, or what I usually did before we had the kids, I would, again, work throughout the day, and then at night, I don't need much sleep. I would sit there for a couple of hours, go through my emails. With these 3 to 4 hours at night were baked into how I did my work. And when we had Peter and Renata, I sometimes, at some point, realized, like, look, A, I'm too tired, and B, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something else. So because I had my kids, I then also went back or went into other hobbies that I either neglected. I bought a telescope and got into astrophotography, which I still do today. I did a little bit of snowboarding at the time. I then went much, much more snowboarding, which, of course, if you live in Silicon Valley, you have Tahoe nearby, all these amazing ski resorts here. So we ended up going there quite a lot. And then I also started riding my bike again, which I always did when I was in Germany. And then I started riding my bike here in Silicon Valley, actually to work and back. And we have pretty amazing mountains here where you can do some really advanced rides. And so this really changed how I did my work, but also, again, how I prioritized my work, what I thought about it. I realized this when we talked about features, when we planned releases. Again, having more exposure to a world outside of work really made a difference to me, and really, I think, made a positive difference, that you're not so in your Silicon Valley Google bubble. All you do is talk day in, day out to people who work, again, at Google on amazing websites, amazing applications, scalable services, all these things. If you just do something outside, if you go outside, see another world, being, yep, that's where you can find most of my images. And then, yeah, as I said, it made quite a difference to me how I prioritized my work, but also how I thought about my work. And so this then, again, changed quite a lot. So the websites, again, I worked on Gmail, I worked on YouTube. And it was great to work on these consumer products and not to approach everything from a Google perspective, but actually approaching it from kind of the outside. How things, I mean, these are consumer products. These are products that people work when they go snowboarding. Particular YouTube, like having kids, if you work on YouTube, is super helpful because your kids tell you what you should build on YouTube and whatnot. And so that was really a big change for me, how I approached my work, how I prioritized my work, how I thought about my work. And so I spent then the next couple of years in consumer products, really, really liked it. Until about three and a half years ago, I was at YouTube at the time. And I was responsible for sort of everything on the front end except watching videos. So watching videos was one team, but then everything else, subscribing, building your channel, comments under videos, creating videos, uploading videos, all this functionality I was responsible for. And so we had great plans. And I realized at some point I didn't like it anymore. I liked it, but it didn't motivate me anymore that much. It wasn't that important to me anymore. And so it took me really a while to acknowledge this, first to myself, then to my peers and my manager, and sort of to say, look, I think I want to leave. And I was ready to leave Google, actually, to say, look, I want to, also at the time, as a director at Google, you manage teams of like 100, 200, 300 people. I also wanted to have something much smaller. I was sort of tired of just being the whole day in meetings with other directors and other VPs, trying to figure out a way that all my teams can actually build software. I wanted to build software myself. And so this whole process took a couple of months. And then at some point, I talked to my manager. And then Google did a pretty amazing thing that Google said, OK, you're here for such a long time. Take your time, figure out what you want to do. Google literally paid me for a couple of months to just find my next job. I quit YouTube. I wasn't there any longer, but I was still employed by Google. And I interviewed at many companies outside of Google, but then also looked inside of Google, other teams, other efforts, what I could do. And then one of my best friends, who then became my manager, he was in research. And research always looked into new ideas. And he's like, look, while we have the time, just help us with brainstorming here. So I then spent some time with some research folks, brainstorming how we can apply Google research, Google approach to, again, machine learning, data analysis, everything that we do in completely new and different areas. And the one area that we focused on a lot was finance. And so out of all this brainstorming came that we said, OK, let's start an effort where we try to explore this with our treasury group, actually. They were very interested in this. Says, look, do you want to run this? And so for me, it basically was everything that I wanted, that I could immerse myself in a completely new domain, finance and financial markets, that I knew a little bit about before, and I could learn again. Again, learning everything about a new domain, learning everything about machine learning. This was also interesting for me, that when I came to Google, machine learning was very much in the background. It did a couple of things. When I was on Gmail, machine learning became more important. Spam abuse filters in Gmail, of course, were based on machine learning algorithms. But it was still to the level that Gmail would work still without even if all the models fail. It wouldn't work that well because you would get all the spam email, but the basic functionality of Gmail is still there. But then over the years after that, it changed more and more, that now many of our apps, if you think about spell corrections and other features, the apps don't work any longer if machine learning doesn't work. So machine learning went from something that optimized something in the background to make existing products better, to actually help us build new products. And so that's why I wanted to learn more about it, thinking like, okay, if it becomes so important, if it becomes a part of the design of new products, I want to learn this. So this effort gave me exactly that opportunity to learn a new domain. I had a tiny team. I could write a lot of source code, which I really liked again. I could learn everything about finance, financial markets, all the way up to machine learning, data analysis. And so this is what I then did the last couple of years, to take this effort, get it from a an early idea where it was really just an idea to where we today have, I mean, just this week, we had discussions with our executive management team. What are the plans? What do we want to do with it? Where we built a couple of pretty amazing models and ideas and now try to figure out how do we get them out and how do we get them to market. And so the one thing that, and then the one thing that you can probably see when you sort of listen to it, how I, again, came to this position that I am today, and the things that I'm doing today, the main thing really is that I did things that I really like doing. And there's a lot of people, and these are some of the quotes that I found that talk about this. From Steve Jobs, people with passion can change the world for the better. Chris Gardner, he's an investment banker who lived on the streets, so was literally homeless. They actually made a movie out of him. Find something you love to do so much you can't wait for the sun to rise to do it all over again. Mark Zuckerberg, following your happiness. Warren Buffett, the importance of finding what it is that brings true meaning and what makes each day important. This sort of speaks to this, like doing something that you're passionate about and focusing on that. And with that, you will do something great. You will do something amazing. There's only one problem with these quotes. It's a lie. What we have here is what we call in machine learning survivorship bias. Again, these are all people who made it. And it's easy when you made it to say, all I did is I followed my passion. There's a lot of people along the way who were passionate about something and who didn't make it to the top, who are passionate about something. I mean, not only are these people passionate about what they're doing, they're really good about it. I mean, Steve Jobs, he's an amazing product manager, an amazing visionary. Warren Buffett is an amazing investor. They're really good at what they're doing. They're also all really lucky that the stuff that they're passionate about and that they're good at pays a lot of money, that they can have these amazing careers and build these amazing companies, and that the stuff not only pays money, but they were in an environment where they can actually do it. I mean, you can imagine there's probably lots of people in the world who are really good in computer science, who love computer science, but who just live in a township out somewhere in South Africa or in Siberia, who just have no chance to ever get to this level. So it's something that I learned, like, yes, we always talk about passion, and it's super important that you do something that you're passionate about, but there is much, much more to it. Just saying, follow your passion and everything is fine. There is lots and lots and lots of people that you wouldn't invite to a talk like this who did that and who didn't go anywhere, who had to change careers, who ended up in a place where they followed their passion, but it was something that either didn't pay any money or that they actually weren't good at. And so as important as passion is, and you see it throughout my career, I made lots and lots of decisions because he was something more interesting to me than before. So I did it. But again, I was also lucky that working in this field right now, yes, I ended up at a company like Google that pays a lot of money, where I have the luxury to say, I start all over again. I work on something completely new, and I go from a few hundred people to 5 people. I can do this because the company pays for it and the environment is there. And so when I think about, again, how did I end up here? I think a much, much better description is also from a quote from Steve Jobs, actually. This is something that he said at his, I think it was in 2004, the commencement speech at Stanford. And if you haven't watched it, I highly, highly recommend to watch it. It's a great speech. And where he talks about his career, and his career also took many, many turns. Again, he started Apple. He was fired from Apple. He started a new company that then was acquired by Apple. That's how we came back to Apple and became the CEO. And he said at some point in this talk, he said, connecting the dots only makes sense in hindsight. In hindsight, it's easy to say, oh yeah, I'm here because of this, because of this, because of this. But at the time, there wasn't a plan. There wasn't a great vision. At some point, I want to do this. Steve Jobs never envisioned that he at some point would run the most successful company on the planet. In hindsight, it looks obvious, but at the time, you make these decisions, and you make these decisions hoping for the best. You have no idea. Again, when I came to the US, I had no idea what I would do with it. I started the startup company. Again, as I said, like I had issues, or not issues any longer, with my girlfriend at the time. I was happy to go to the US. But there wasn't a plan. There wasn't a plan, oh, I'm going to work at one or two companies to then really make it big. It was a decision that I made, and some of the decisions, or most of the decisions that I think I made in my life, they made sense, and that's why connecting the dots in hindsight makes sense, and it looks logical. But it only makes sense in hindsight. And so I think that's what we all have to do when we plan our lives, go through our lives, is finding this right balance. Sometimes we might make decisions purely based on passion. And sometimes we have to make more pragmatic decisions. Sometimes we have to make decisions that maybe don't get us the dream job, but it's good enough that we do it. Or sometimes we have to make a decision that, yes, we can follow our passion, but it means we have to make a big change that we don't really want to make normally. So I think that's the thing that I think, to me, when I think about how I ended up here at Google, is this quote from Steve Jobs that resonates the most with me. Yes, I did these things, few plan in mind, and in hindsight it makes sense, but it's only that it makes sense in hindsight. And maybe a better description of this is, I sometimes call myself the Forrest Gump of the IT industry, where I just did things because I wanted to do them, and it led me here without ever having a big plan. And that's it.
Very sorry, I had to run out.
Are you okay?
Yeah, it just suddenly started to ring. But we're all here. Cool, perfect. We were basically collecting some questions during the stream.
Okay.
So we're gonna basically bring them out, and then we'll also have. So don't worry, everyone in the chat right now. We're gonna have a Slido Q&A. So we just picked out a few questions that you might be able to answer now, and then we'll also have a longer Q&A session. I'm sorry, I'm out of breath. I ran back just in case. So does anyone want to start with the questions while I catch my breath?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to start you off. We've got the first one that we came in was from Merlin, and it's quite specific. And so he wonders what Mark's thoughts are as a team member at Google on the fact that OpenAI have recently signed Microsoft their new AI GPT-3. Does Mark think this is a big deal? And are Google doing something similar?
So I know OpenAI. I don't know what the Microsoft thing is.
So GPT-3 is a generative pre-trained transformer. So it's an autoregressive language model. So it's deep learning with text. But
Okay.
I don't know if you've had much experience there.
No, my area is not at all in NLP, language understanding, or anything. My area is, again, more in quantitative models. So yeah, unfortunately, I can't really say anything about that.
All right. Cool. Roz, do you want to go for the next one? Your audio is really weird. Your audio went really weird. It's like a Dalek or something. I don't know. Talk? Yeah, don't worry. I'll read it. Something happened on her dear. Cool. So Mark, have you met? So Daniel asked, have you met Ray Kurzweil during your first time at Google? What do you think about his ideas about singularity, and what could it mean for us as future computer scientists?
Actually sat very close to Ray Kurzweil when I was in research. I think, first of all, he's one of these people that I love. It's one of the reasons why I'm at Google, why I'm still at Google, is he can put every discussion that you have, and it can be a discussion about a tiny feature or something. He can put everything into an amazing, really meaningful context, because he has so much information at his disposal, from theory to application and everything. And so this idea of a singularity, again, this is something, having now worked for quite a while in research, I feel it's, and this is a very personal thing. You have people at Google who heavily disagree with me on this. I feel it's not there anytime soon. The systems that we build today, they're insanely specialized systems. Like, I mean, even at Google, even when we build something that's similar to something that we built before, quite often we have to start from scratch just because the data is slightly different, the objective function is slightly different, the scale is slightly different. So I think, and again, within those domains, these algorithms do amazing things. Again, they find out things, they optimize amazing things. We have self-driving cars now. But the idea that you can now apply or use the self-driving car algorithms and machinery to, I mean, even to do something related, to run a locomotive on tracks, it just doesn't work. So I think this idea of a singularity, I think it's interesting, and it will at some point in the future, but for me that future is quite far. It might get there, but I haven't seen any real successful systems where a system can learn something that it wasn't built to learn. Our systems today are very, very purposeful built.
Cool. Do you want to take the next question? If anyone wants to take.
So I'd been asked for Google, what are the main principles that you focus on when making products, both hardware and software?
That's a great question. So at Google, this comes from our founder. And again, I just had a meeting this week where I got that experience again, that our founders always thought, and Larry was insanely persistent on this, is we don't want to build products that are good enough. We don't want to build products that do something that people use and it's fine. We want to do something where we feel we can do it differently and we can do it better than anything else that's out there. I mean, this became known as the sort of 10x thinking of Google. And it would literally be that you sit in meetings with Larry and you present him an amazing idea, and he was not impressed. He was just not impressed because he felt, look, your machine still needs power. Figure out how to run it without electricity. Then it becomes more. Then I start getting interested. And so, as I said, I had this experience this week that after 3.5 years of working on these algorithms and everything, we had a presentation to our executive team and said, this is what we want to build. And we spent a lot of time on the idea, the service, the machine learning and everything, and the rollout strategy. And I said, like, look, I think there wasn't a single question actually about the product that we want to build, but just that the main feedback was really, you're not ambitious enough. How you want to use your amazing idea is not big enough. So go back, come back in a month or so and tell us how you can do it bigger, how we can do it more. And I think this is something that drives us at Google, that we try to put into a lot of things. So like, let's not settle on something that's still good, that still might make us money, but something that's really, really ambitious, that really can make a change, can really something that can make a difference in the world. And underlying is then at Google a very, very good and deep understanding of everyone about computer science. It's really amazing. Like our lawyers, many of our lawyers have a CS degree. And so that means you can have discussions with people, again, in my case, of course, every time you do something in finance, there's regulation, there's privacy, data security, everything. Having now a discussion with lawyers and with privacy experts who actually understand our systems that we built at Google makes an amazing difference. I don't have to create a presentation that's void of any technical jargon and translate our concepts to them. They give me some feedback, and now I have to translate it back into technology. We can have these discussions on a very technical level. And that's another thing that I really, really like at Google, that my entire management chain right now, these are all people who have degrees in computer science and who can toe-to-toe with me on a lot of the concepts that we build on and that we use. So I think it's those two things, using computer science and not just how to write code, but really understanding it, really understanding the concepts, using this to make a difference, to build really big and important services.
Perfect. Matt, do you want to go for the next one? Because I think Hafisa would want to answer the last one.
Yeah, sure. We've got one from Joshua. Do you need to live in Silicon Valley to be a lead developer at Google? And if not, what are the benefits to living in Silicon Valley?
Yeah.
Which is something you sort of started to cover in your talk.
No, not at all.
Do you need to live there?
I mean, Google has offices all over the world now. I mean, in London, we have a pretty big office. Zurich is our other big European office. In the US, we have, of course, Mountain View. Then we have up in Seattle, New York, we have a really big office, Bangalore in India. So we have lots and lots of really large offices around the world. And then we have quite even more smaller offices that are very focused on specific things. But the question is good, because this took us quite a while at Google to figure out how to do it. Because we wanted to expand. When I came to Google, this is when we actually started to expand, when we built up more and more teams outside of Silicon Valley. And it sounded difficult. But what we then had to realize is that everything happened in our headquarters in Mountain View. And so if you worked somewhere else, you didn't have the visibility to what people in Mountain View have. I mean, it's not that you run, or at the time that you ran in twice a day to Larry and Sergey and could have a cool discussion with them. But just the fact that everybody who was doing something was there, that all the other areas, from search to ads to our apps, everything was there in Silicon Valley in our headquarters. That made quite a big difference. And so we ran into this issue for many years, that we built up all these offices, and there was sort of a clear limit how much you could do. At some point, it was clear, if you want to get to the next level, you have to come to our headquarters. And so this required quite a lot of, I mean, really organizational design thinking, to think about how can we stop this? How can we make sure that we build these offices outside, and outside people feel like, and there's not a ceiling for them. And so this is over the last couple of years that I think we got, or that I know we got much, much better at, that we now have more and more people at very senior roles working not just in our headquarters. I mean, why you come to Silicon Valley? I think one of the main answers that I have growing up in northern Germany, believe it or not, the weather in northern Germany is even worse than in London. The weather here is pretty phenomenal. And I still get a kick out of this. I mean, right now it's blue sky, the sun just came up, and today it will be another day with, I don't know, 25 degrees, which is how every day here is. And again, you have all these other, again, you have Tahoe nearby. You can go snowboarding in winter and everything. It's amazing. But yeah, the other thing is really what I said earlier. It's like living in Silicon Valley is you really immerse yourself in this. I mean, internet services, and now it's also bioservice and everything. But this come to Silicon Valley to make a difference. That is something that I definitely still enjoy. When I talk to people, again, not just at Google, when I talk to people who work at other companies, and everybody that you talk here has a big idea, has ambitions. It's this vibe that you have here that I totally enjoy, that gives me a lot of motivation, sometimes concrete ideas, but just having this always there. It also makes, to be honest, for a very, you can call it a very stressful environment. It's not an environment where you say, like, I'm not doing anything. You're not doing anything in Silicon Valley, people look at you like, what do you mean you're not doing anything? Like, I mean, maybe you have enough money that you can say, I really don't. I don't have to do it any longer because I made it. But for the most part, again, every here wants to make a difference. Every here wants to do something. So that's something that I sometimes realize when I leave Silicon Valley, go on vacation, go back to Germany. I'm like, wow, it's so nice every now and then to talk to people who don't have big ideas, who don't want to change the world, who don't want to be super ambitious. So there needs to be a little bit of a balance. But having this as sort of an overall culture and an overall vibe is really, really cool.
Cool. Perfect. Jason asked one about agile methodologies. He's like, has the agile method of release ever caused an incident where the deployment has broken other Google applications?
Oh, yeah. That's an easy answer. Yes. So this is something that I learned when I came to Google. Because again, when I came to Google already, Google had these amazing services. One of my friends, who, again, from my former team, he came to Google. He ran Google Web Search. And at the time when I came to Google, Google Web Search became sort of the proxy for, is my internet working? So reliable. If you can ping www.google.com, you know that your internet is up. Because it was the only service that had this reputation. It's always up. It's never down. And so what I thought is, when I come to Google, I finally realized how they do it. How do they write software that is so amazingly stable and rock solid that it never goes down? And what I had to realize is, very quickly, is that it's not. And the fact that it's not written for 100% accuracy makes it so successful. This sounds so weird. This is something that Larry and Sergey actually very, very early on realized. Again, they had these great plans of creating not just a web service, but a distributed environment that the world has never seen before. Not just a distributed environment over 10 or 100 machines, but a worldwide distributed environment. That was their dream, that they thought, we need that to build services on top. And once you go there, you realize things can become very different. If you have a system that runs on so many systems and is so distributed, things, you can't work any longer trying to keep things from going down. You have to work on things will go down. And how does your system stay alive? And so this was very different for me to learn this. And so the things that we did at Google and that we still do is, A, having very, very dedicated people. So if something goes wrong, people do something about it. Not because they have to, but because we love what we're doing. And so people spending the extra amount of effort, the extra time to figuring this out, keeping our services up and running. And then this idea of building a system that is so failover safe, that you can fail over at so many levels that you can actually deal with outages and what you would normally perceive as lower quality. I do remember, for example, at some point being in a review with some of our VPs. This was many years ago, and it was a design review for our next generation data center. And the next generation data center, again, it's amazing how big these things are, and all the infrastructure that comes with it. And one of the most expensive parts in a data center is, aside from the cooling, is actually the sort of failover. How do you fail over an entire traffic from one internet backbone to the other? And how do you do it so fast that you don't notice it? It's a really, really difficult problem, and it's really expensive to solve. And in that design review, was Hölzer, one of our VPs, he told them, it's like, by the way, when we launch this, we don't need this any longer. We will have a capacity that we can fail over from one data center to another. We will have so much reliability that an entire data center should be able to go down, and we will not notice it, or you notice it. And then, funny enough, a few weeks after that meeting, I was still on AdWords. And what we did in AdWords at the time, when we made changes to our database, we sort of took the whole system down for an hour or so to make updates to the database and bring it back up. And so it was my job to sort of oversee this whole process. It's a coordination over many, many teams, front end, back end, database, and everything. And so we were getting ready to do this. And I do remember that, I think I still have that email because I thought it was so funny, that one of the SREs said, like, oh yeah, we are ready to do the failover, but let me check. There's some problems in Oregon, and Oregon was one of the data centers that AdWords was running in. Let me check what it is before we start. And then 2 minutes later, he sends a reply saying, like, okay, Oregon, and then in brackets, the state, not the data center, is down. We have to fail over to Atlanta. And so what happened is, it's this funny thing that you always hear in like some funny stories that you think can't happen. At the time, the only backbone connection to Oregon and southern Washington state was overland. Because of tectonic activity, you couldn't have it underground. And some idiot who was out hunting literally killed the internet connection by shooting at it. And so, literally, the state of Oregon was down. All we had left was a dial-up connection, or something that resembles a dial-up connection to our data center. And so it was an amazing effort. We did fail over everything live from Oregon to Atlanta, and nobody outside of Google didn't even realize that this happened. And so that and that gives and it's a great question. That's something that I had to learn. Where again, Agile used to have being. Agile used to be much more descriptive, and it had these very clear principles what you do and what you don't do. And that's what I had to learn at Google. Is like we apply it, or how it gets applied at Google is very different from how you might apply it somewhere else because of the systems that we have, because of the people that we have. That's really what I had to learn at the beginning, that I can't come in and say, hey, here's Agile, we should just do it. I had to learn how to apply it there, and this was really one of the principles. Yes, we have to do a good job in testing, but we only have to do so good a job. There's certain things where the benefit of having more stability through more and more test automation actually goes down. And if you have then these failover systems in the background, you can actually deal with it.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. Hafisa, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from maths and computer science background as well, but I find it so hard finding a summer internship or a placement. Since you did your master's in mathematics, I would like to ask you, how was your switch from maths and computer science? Like, do you want to give any suggestions?
Oh, interesting. I wouldn't think that that's difficult. So to be honest, for me, when I started working, I almost gave up all my math background. Mm-hmm. It was all about computer science. It was all about programming. I think the one thing that I learned from math that helped me many years later, actually, when I came to Google, the main thing that I took away from math was this ability to live, or not to live, but this ability to experience like very different environments. Doesn't really make sense. Again, algebra. In algebra, you go from like 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions to n. We have no idea what n dimensions means. We can barely understand what a 4th dimension would mean for us. And at some point, you go into systems that don't even have dimensions. Groups and all these other. But you learn these underlying definitions, and then you learn basically the behavior in these systems. And so the only thing that you have is the underlying assumptions that you make and everything that follows from it. And that you sort of have to blend out your own experience, your own thing. It doesn't help you. And so this really helps if you think about something like Google's infrastructure. There is no way when I came to Gmail, I think Gmail at the time had already, I don't know how many petabytes of storage and ran over how many thousands of computers. There's no way that you can try to imagine how this works. So this ability to say, I can completely abstract this away. I don't try to make it something that I can imagine, but I have to be able to, as I said, almost live in it. I can't always go back, because of this might work, this might, I don't have the time. So I have to figure out how to live in an environment, how to imagine work in an environment that is not based on my experience. That, I think, was one of the most valuable lessons. It's also a lesson, to be honest, that I think helps me a lot in today's society. When we have these discussions about different cultures and about different countries and everything, being able to say, okay, I have a certain set of values from where I grew up in Germany, where I live right now in the US. But then people from other countries, from other cultures, come up with very different ideas from how we do things here. And the ability to then say, okay, if I don't apply my underlying values and experiences to it, but if I try to imagine if I grow up there, what they do still makes sense because of their values. And so I think that was one of the most valuable, it wasn't even a lesson, but it was one of the most valuable aspects of studying mathematics. Mm-hmm. I think today, mathematics becomes much more important because we do so much with machine learning and with data analysis. Again, in the last 3.5 years, when I switched into research, I've actually had to use mathematics again. I had to learn again what eigenvectors are and everything, like things that I didn't even think about for many years. So I think today there's actually a pretty big opportunity to apply mathematics much more concrete in computer science because of this congruence of data analytics, machine learning, and computer science. The systems that we have today, they are not as generic and mature that you sort of can just use them, like database systems. You can use a database. You don't need to know how a database works because databases are generic and mature enough. I mean, even these environments that we build, TensorFlow, TensorHub, PyTorch, everything, they're not that generic and that mature that you can just use them. In order to use them, you have to really understand them. And in order to understand them, you have to understand the underlying mathematics. And so I think there's actually an opportunity, if you're interested in both, to focus on this part. And again, then you have to learn more on the infrastructure side from computer science, because again, even on the infrastructure side, the systems are not mature enough. And you have to bring enough of mathematics to actually understand it. Our best researchers at Google, they all have a mathematical background. You can't do research these days by just applying algorithms to a new problem. As I said, every time we have to almost start from scratch. Every time we have to figure it out again. What is the data? I mean, it starts with the data even. It's not even the algorithm. It's just getting the data in a good enough quality. When do you know that the data is in a good enough quality? All this is based on mathematics. That would be my advice, like focusing on these type of things. And I would think that I would hope actually that there's lots and lots of opportunities where companies say, I mean, we have this discussion on our team right now about interns that we run, and we're like, look, there's so many things where somebody who doesn't have all the background of our infrastructure at Google and who didn't work for years and years and years with computer science, but there's lots and lots of things where we can use people who, again, have a fairly solid mathematical and computer science background and can just focus on one of these things. So I think today it might be better. Again, I don't think you will run into the issue that I ran into in '94 when I was finally done with university. And literally there was one ad in Hanover for a COBOL programmer at a bank. That was the only thing that I could have done.
Cool, perfect. We're going to take one more question from the chat, and then we're going to transition onto this Q&A platform as well, because we've got quite a lot of questions coming in. So the last question from this part of it is, what advice would you, Yaz asked, what advice would you give yourself if you were magically reborn as a 20-year-old in the current climate?
Wow. Of course, it's easy to say that I would have it much easier. That's what probably every adult will tell you. Well, I think the one thing, again, this is something that wasn't even a thought for me when I studied. The influence on the world, on society that our work has is just unbelievable. I mean, if you think about it, again, when I graduated, when I finished school, '94, the internet was barely there. And it was sort of a niche thing. There was no service on the planet that was used. And by service, I mean everything. It's like banks, shopping, name it. There was no service in the world that was used by more than, I don't know, 1 or 2 million people. And that was big. Today, 1 or 2 million people doesn't get you anywhere. I mean, at Google, we have 6 services that are used by more than 1 billion people. We have services that are used by more than 50% of the internet population. And so I think, again, this is something we had to figure out along the way. And quite often, to be honest, we didn't figure it out. We just built these systems and then realized at some point, like, boy, this is the impact that we have. Again, very global, very, I mean, so concrete, not abstract any longer, not contained to a certain demographic or a certain country or something. So I think today, especially when you go into this field, I would encourage everyone to understand that of the equation too. As I said, in Silicon Valley, everybody wants to make a difference. And that's great. But how do you know that the difference that you make is good? how do you know that the difference that you make is something that you look back later and say like, wow, I'm glad I did this? I don't think I did ever anything in my sort of professional life that I look back and say like, boy, I wish I wouldn't have done it. But I'm pretty sure or I know that there's a number of people in Silicon Valley who think now, looking backwards, I wish I wouldn't have done it. And so I think that understanding and that sort of humility that comes with it is like, you learn something that has the potential. Again, when we say to make a big difference in the world, the big difference can be very, very bad. So I think keeping that in mind, and keeping that in mind is if we talk about big systems, if we talk about difference, yes, there's lots of opportunity, but there's also lots of danger. And being aware of like, you're learning something, you're going into something that has that potential. That is very inspiring, that's very motivating, but boy, it's also pretty scary. And we went into it, my generation went into it, we didn't realize that it would go this way. We built these systems and realized afterwards, like, oh my God, I can't believe the impact that we have. But then we had to figure out the responsibility that comes with it.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, cool. We're going to switch now to Slido platform. I hope this works. Cool. Okay, great. I need to get rid of this banner. I have no idea how I'm meant to get rid of that one. Okay, there we go. Cool. There we go. So these are some of the questions coming through. So we'll just take it on the top. So do you like Elon Musk?
First of all, I don't think there's many people who like Elon Musk. I mean, there's not much you can say. Like, this guy is, again, one of the most driven, one of the most ambitious people. As I said, like, you work on systems that change the world. Like, boy, he definitely works on systems that change the world. I know a number of people who work either at SpaceX or at Tesla, and pretty much everybody says the same thing. It's like, you work there because you work on something absolutely mind-blowing and that, again, changes the world. But many people say, like, you don't like your work because it sucks. I mean, it's motivating because it's so advanced, it's so grand, but the environment that he creates, it's really tough. So I think liking, I don't think you find many people who would say, well, I mean, I'm not his friend, so I don't know people who know him on that level, but most people I don't think would say like him, but I mean, you admire the guy. You admire a guy who says, like, I want to save the world, not in an abstract way. I do it. I build companies that, again, one tries to like change the energy to a sustainable energy, and the other one is like, well, and if that doesn't work and we need to plan B, I have a second company that we can start over again on a different planet. That's an insane thing, but he does that.
Fair enough. I always think though he's like one of the, like, if you like go back and hear his stories, so like, I don't know, he's not, from what I've heard is like when he was in college, when he got his house, he used to like charge people like entrance tickets to come in for his like nightclub type thing. But then you also hear about like when he rented his first office, he slept there and stuff like that. So I have very mixed opinions about him. I feel like, you know, he's pushing the limits, which is good. We always need innovation.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's really, it's not even bad to be strange. It's some of the things he does. I don't know how to describe it. It's just,
yeah. I think the one thing that you have to sort of always remember about people like Elon Musk, and again, there's a bunch of these people, is like the mission is the most important thing. Like, that's what he focuses on, himself and everyone else. And so people who work for him say that they say, look, if you work for him, if you help him with his mission, he's your guy. He helps you. He gives you resources and everything. The moment you don't, and that might not even be because you slack off or something. It might just be that the area that you worked on that used to be super important for his mission is not. You're out. There's no loyalty there. There's no like, oh, this guy was around for a long time. It's like, so if you see it through this lens, it's actually okay. And again, it creates an environment where people do amazing things, but you don't expect then loyalty from him because you know you won't get it. The moment you don't help any longer with, again, his idea of saving the planet, you're out.
Yeah. Wait. There's quite a few coming in. Do you think AI is suitable for someone who is still learning how to code? Which line of work do you think is better, AI or software engineering?
No. I definitely think, again, AI itself, when you look at the algorithms that we build, they actually don't require a lot of code. Like the amount of code that we write for our AI systems is surprisingly small. So not really understanding everything about coding and languages, algorithms, data structures, and everything, it's not the worst part. I mean, you just have to admit to yourself you probably won't build the most efficient AI algorithm. But to get into it, to learn it, I would think is not too hard, because the CS concepts that you need to just get started are very limited. And as I said, the mathematics are actually much, much more important. I think between software engineering and AI, I think people are driven to different things. Again, we have people at Google who work for 15, 20 years now on our ads infrastructure. And they love it because it's an infrastructure that you don't have anywhere else in the world. So they get an insane motivation out of it, working on this infrastructure. And every time we think we can't make it bigger, they make it bigger, they make it faster. For me, this would be horrible. Like, I'm not an infrastructure engineer at all. So I think it's more like trying it out and figuring out like what excites you more.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is about those two things, infrastructure and AI. Again, right now we need both. On our research teams, we always have both. We always have like the whole bandwidth from people who do pure research and very little computer science or programming to infrastructure who might not know anything or might not know much about AI. We need the entire bandwidth. So it actually makes it easy to go from one to the other. I sometimes have people joining my team who say, look, I don't know anything about ML, but I'm a good infrastructure engineer. And I can tell them, it's like, yeah, if you're interested in it, you can start here. You will get enough exposure to it that you will understand it. And then you can sort of slowly extend yourself into this direction that you actually get more and more into that part too. But I think it also works the other way around. Again, the systems are not that mature. You can't just take a system out of the box, build your algorithms data on top of it, and it works. You will have to figure out the infrastructure sooner or later anyway too. So starting from that end and going then into the infrastructure software engineering side also works.
What's your opinion? We have an event coming up soon next month where we're going to basically introduce people to AI. Because one of my personal beliefs is like I always think there's free versions of AI. And I always think that the issue is AI is thrown around all the time now. It's just like every company has to have the word AI in there to be successful. And I also like, so, like, for example, in Google Cloud, you have AutoML. I was going through it with the core team the other day, literally. The guys were like, everyone remember, we went on Teachable Machines with Google because we were planning another event. And I made an AI model within minutes. I did thumbs up, thumbs down, gave it about 100 photos of each hand with a thumbs up and thumbs down. And I was like, work out what it is, right? Simple as that. And I think there's the AI with no code. Then there's the AI with like TensorFlow or PyTorch, which is a library written to make it super simple for people to integrate it in. But then there's this AI that everyone's trying to like get into where it's actually quite complex. You need that background in maths to help you to make an innovation in that area. Like I don't know, like I feel like that's where people don't understand the limits. Because if I was to search how to make an AI to play a game, someone would probably recommend me to TensorFlow and integrating TensorFlow into like TensorFlow Lite into a mobile game, right? It's a very simple procedure. But then if I wanted to make something from scratch, that's now a lot more difficult than That's where I think this confusion comes in sometimes about like when you say you really want to go into AI, like what AI? Like it's quite a broad term.
And as I said, I think if you go into it, you have to you have to be okay that there is no way that you can just work on the AI parts. I mean, it starts with data, getting the data into the system. Quite often, that's where we spend a lot of time. Not even cleaning up the data, that comes later, just getting the data into the system, storing it in a format that we can use it at scale, then figuring out how do we clean it up, what do we have to make, how do we figure out that it's good enough. Again, you always do things at scale here. So you always have to do something in a way that you can't manually check anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that is the thing that I was definitely surprised when I came into it, realizing, boy, we always say this, when we work on AI teams, 20% on AI. We work 80% or we work 60% on data cleaning, and 20% on infrastructure, and 20% on AI.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what you have to get in. So I think if you start out, that's probably one of the most important things. Make sure that you try to start with something where you know that it sounds so simple, you can actually get the data for it. But there's nothing more frustrating if you have a great idea and then you spend your entire time trying to get the data, or you get data, then you build algorithms realizing, okay, the data is not good enough. It has holes in the middle, or there's a different scale to it because you combine two different data sets or something. Again, this is also a big problem for us when we build these systems. As I said, we spend a lot of time on the data part itself, but I think especially when you start something from scratch, I would definitely recommend it, like trying to figure out, like, will I be able to get the data? And will I be able to either get the data clean enough, or will I have not so much the infrastructure, but the knowledge to actually clean it up?
Yeah.
If not, then it doesn't matter what idea you have. It will just not work.
Yeah. Yeah. Because a lot of the data you would receive today, like, I feel like, when you're learning it, so I remember when I learned this, you'd go somewhere and they have a perfect data set ready for you, and it's made to practice machine learning. However, when you go into the real world, some of that you will have gaps. If you're trying to just figure out, I don't know, your user base, not everyone's filled in every form, and now you've got these gaps. And when you're training a model, that might now be an anomaly, and that causes difference in predictions and stuff like that. So this is what people don't understand. The beginning, but this could maybe go for software engineering. I'm wondering your opinion. When it goes to software engineering, the design and planning stage is much more important than just the coding part. Like, it takes up a lot more time. You planning how you're going to design this AI model, machine learning model, to actually do something is a lot about finding the data, looking what algorithms you're going to use, cleaning the data. Like you said, it's a planning stage before going into it. And I think that's the same for software engineering, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's actually slightly different. This is something, again, that I had to learn in the last couple of years. In software engineering, again, that's sort of what Agile told us. You just work on small increments, and you can test them and they work, and then if they don't work, you do something else, you can change it. In a research team these days, at least, you can't really do this because you don't have fast iterations. Again, the iteration time from trying out a new data set to building a model on top of that data set that does something that you then understand, does my model idea, not the data, does my model idea work? That can easily be weeks or months. And so you sort of do a different type of planning and a different type of milestones. Like, one of the things, for example, that we do is when we have one of these ideas, or we can try out this model, or we can try out this data set. One of the worst things you can do is to say, okay, now let's build the infrastructure that we can actually ingest the data, clean it up, do everything. Weeks and weeks and weeks until you even have the data, and then you can start building on top of it. What we always try to do in research is to say, how can we test as quickly as possible if this idea makes sense or not? We're not building the system at all. We're just trying to figure out, and sometimes you come up with ideas and evaluations that have nothing to do with the problem that you want to solve. But it's something that gives you a little bit more confidence that, okay, it's worth spending all this time to getting into it, that at the end something positive comes out of it. But this idea to evaluate ideas, not based on let's just do it or let's think about it, but what experiment can I run over the data, over the infrastructure that I have, to gain more confidence that it actually will work. That is a very different process than the normal software engineering process.
Yeah. Cool. Someone's asked, is it hard working for big companies like Google, Apple, etc.?
Is it hard? Well, we get free food.
That makes it a lot easier.
No, it's just very different to work for these big companies. Again, if you work at a small startup company, you have a problem, you turn around, you speak loud enough, and everybody hears you. You can solve problems on the fly with everyone. If you work at larger companies, that kind of doesn't work any longer, but at least everybody still works on the same thing. So there's a lot of common language, common understanding. If you work at something like Google or Apple, I mean, Google even more so than Apple, we do everything under the sun that has to do with computers. So the amount of coordination and collaboration that we have to do on top of doing actually the product building work is just totally different. And so this is something that if you like that, if you like working on such a complexity of problems where you can't say, now I just focus myself and my team, or we're just doing it, we're just building it. But if you say, I have this amazing idea, again, that's literally what I'm dealing with right now. I have this amazing idea, and now I have to put it into the larger concept of Google, of the other products that we have, things that are similar, things that might even compete with my product, with user demands, with existing users, with existing infrastructure. You put your ideas into a much, much larger context, and it creates an insane amount of complexity. And if you like that, then it's an amazing place to work, because then the abilities that you have are just mind-boggling.
Mm-hmm.
But if you actually want to say, like, look, I just want to focus on something, work on something, not worry about how it fits into a larger context, I mean, you get frustrated very quickly at Google, because again, you spend a significant amount of your time and energy on figuring out the larger context of your idea.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That sort of feeds back into what you were saying earlier about like what you're currently doing, isn't it? A lot, like you have this idea, it's ready. So do you think if you were in or probably yes, if you were in a startup with that exact idea of what you're doing right now, they would have gone for it, but instead Google's now, because you're on a much larger scale, you're dealing with a much larger user base and everything, you have to push it to its limits to fit in with.
Exactly. But then at the same time, I mean, our idea is a fantastic example. Unfortunately, I can't talk about it, but our idea is in the consumer space. And so if you do something in the consumer space with internet applications, as a startup company, there comes a time where more than half of your effort just goes into figuring out distribution. Because there's so many, I mean, on the App Store, on the Play Store, there's a gazillion of apps. How do you make your app stand out? How do you make your website stand out? So at some point, you completely switch from your idea to actually, how do we get people to use this idea? Well, if you work at Google, you don't have that problem. Like, we launch something, you get 5 million users without even thinking about it. So that is the big thing that comes with it. We have the infrastructure. Nobody will ever say at Google, you can't build this because the infrastructure is too large that's required to run this. Mm-hmm. So that's the things that you get at a company like Google. It's amazing. But yeah, but you focus on different things. And as I said, for me, that is one of the things that I still like at Google, the opportunities that it gives me to do my work. But yeah, the complexity that then comes with it is something that I just have to deal with.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What would be better, specializing in a CS degree in AI or software engineering? I feel like this is very similar to the other question, but I think they're basically asking, if they were to study, which one would you choose? Would you do like a module that specializes in software engineering especially, or in AI?
To be honest, I don't think it matters. As I said, I think you can come out with the exact same jobs after working for a couple of years after university in this field. As I said, if you go in computer engineering, in software engineering, and you work on that, you will get exposed to AI and machine learning automatically. And then it's up to you to say, okay, do I want to stay on this side, or do I want to learn more and more of this? If you go into AI, as I said, right now, when you want to do anything, you will have to write a lot of code. You will have to understand the underlying systems. So I think it's mostly like what interests you more. But I think the knowledge that it won't corner you into something, I think should be good. That, you know, like the decision that you make right now, it's not once and you decide and then it's done. You start AI and you will always come to engineering or vice versa.
Cool. Perfect. Do you have any advice for students who are trying to find placements or graduate jobs?
I mean, again, this is totally Google centric, because that's what I do, like hire for Google and see people at Google that we hire and how we hire them. It's like, but I think most companies, again, we learned this over the years. We don't worry that much any longer about grades and about universities. I mean, there was a time at Google when Google only hired PhDs, and then it was masters, and then it was bachelors, and now we even hire people without a degree. But the thing that most companies want, if you really want to get into this field, is that you have a really good understanding of what you're doing. And one way to do that is to get a degree. But again, there's lots of people who have a degree who never develop that understanding. There's lots of people who come purely from just writing source code, writing it, really understand how do I use, in the simplest way, one C++ container versus the other. What's the better choice here? Like, if you work at these systems that we build, you better understand this at some point. You don't just write code and, okay, something under the hood just makes it work. So I think the sort of developing this really good understanding, that is probably one of the most important things, because that's at the heart when we do our interviews at Google. In the end, we try to figure out two things. A, how good do you really understand what you're doing? Again, that's where these algorithmic questions come from. It's not that one of the worst things that somebody can actually do is if we ask an algorithmic question, that they go on the whiteboard and within 30 seconds write the perfect algorithm down. And it's like, okay, you just quoted something out of a book. That's great for you, but it doesn't tell me anything. I want to see, do you understand this? Can you work in this space? The other thing, this is also where our questions come from at Google, is, again, we problems where we don't have a solution for. And the only way to solve it is by actually talking about it and working with others. So that's where this idea comes from. Like, you get a problem, you get an algorithmic question, and we know you can't solve it. There's no way that you have the answer. As I said, if you have the answer, it's a zero signal. But if you don't have the answer, we want to see that you can go on a whiteboard, start brainstorming, start writing something down, talk about it, understand, how do you explain this now to me? I just ask you the question, but how do you explain to me your solution? Can we have a discussion? Can we now solve it together? That's literally what we do at a company like Google day in, day out. You have a problem that you don't know immediately how to solve it. You have to be able to turn around to your team, to your neighbor, to a mailing list, whatever we have, and say, like, hey, here I have this problem, somebody can help me. And somebody gives you an answer, and you can have a discussion about this particular problem very, very quickly and very efficiently to then actually solve it. Mm-hmm. So I think those are the skills that are really important today if you want to get in. Like, UML is a great example. Nobody's using UML. Like, it's a horrible idea to think this is how you can specify and build a system. But the abstraction from UML we use almost on a daily basis when we talk about systems. Because it's great to have a language that, again, abstracts away a lot, and it allows us to go on a whiteboard and, again, draw something like the global Gmail infrastructure on a whiteboard that doesn't span three miles high and so this ability to abstract, to talk about these concepts, abstract things away that are not necessary, and through that actually being able to focus on a problem of a much larger system without getting constantly distracted by the larger system. And that's what you get when you understand the systems. When I work on Gmail, in theory, I know I could go all the way, I would understand everything. I don't have to, but I at least know how these systems work.
Mm-hmm. Cool. What are your thoughts on low code? Do you think it will replace true coding as a whole?
Boy, what is low code?
I'm assuming it's low-level programming. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, low-level programming language. I just Googled it. So yes, like, do you think going, well, technically back, I guess, when we're now programming at the lowest level, do you think that, I don't know the history of this question, but I'm assuming, yeah, do you think we're going to go back to low-level programming?
I think some of us will have to. Again, the algorithms that we build and the systems that we build, I mean, we see this even today at Google. We still make optimizations to our underlying storage and distribution algorithms. And sometimes tiny changes that have a huge impact. So you definitely need some people who work at this level. And again, with sometimes just new chips, new instruction sets, you can suddenly make optimizations that you couldn't make before. So some people will need it. I don't think I've done, I mean, C++ is the lowest level coding that I do for the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years or something. So I think it will not go away. Again, that's the thing. Like we still innovate on the entire stack, on like the underlying hardware. We even, again, with our TPUs, we got a completely new set of computing chips now, of instruction sets, of capabilities, and of properties of our underlying hardware. So of course we need some people who now figure out, okay, how can we now build on this higher level abstractions that can then use to solve problems. So some people definitely need to do it, but not everybody.
Okay, cool. So there's a few that are more about you. So I'm going to ask them as a bulk, get them out of the way. So I'll go in that order that sort of makes sense. Talk about a day in your life as an engineering director at Google. What do you like most about it? Your hobbies, which I think you touched on really during your talk. And what do you see yourself doing next?
Okay. So my life right now as an engineering director is quite different from the sort of regular engineering director, because again, my effort is still in a state where it's not prototyping and proof of concept any longer, but it's not a large effort. Again, usually as a director, you have many teams reporting to you, and something between 100, 500 people in these teams. My team is still tiny. Day as a director at Google is probably way more than 50% in meetings. Meetings with other directors, with other VPs, because your job as a director at Google is to first set the stage for, okay, here's something totally new that we want to start. And again, if you start something totally new at Google, chances are there's 5 teams somewhere at Google who do something related to it. They might say, hey, we are actually doing it, why do you do it? Or they build some infrastructure that you can use. Or they did something in the past that they stopped doing that might still be relevant. So, and what you try to do is, as a director, you try to set the environment for your teams that work to be productive, that they can focus on actually building products and writing code and designing UIs and everything that they have to do. And again, that's sort of, as I said, the complexity that comes with working at a company like Google. Your job is to remove that complexity from your teams, that they don't have to worry about it, that they can focus on something, and this, no other team will come in 2 months and say, hey, we already did build this, or we want to do this. Why are you building this? Or we have something here that we can't launch together or something. That's really my job as a director, to remove this complexity, that your teams can stay productive and can focus on the thing that they're actually building and working on.
Okay.
And again, that is an interesting thing, but it means, and this is really what I was missing a couple of years ago, you're not working on the product yourself anymore. All your job is making sure that other people can work on the product itself. And that's what I was missing.
Yeah. So one of the other ones is like, what do you see yourself doing next after? Do you think that's like...
Well, I think I will go back to being a director. Because again, this idea that we have, once we start building it, I will have to do the same thing again, that now, again, we will have much, much larger teams then. We will need to do what we always do, is like build these systems, but now they need to be embedded in the larger Google context. And that will be back on me to make sure that my teams can then focus on working on the product itself, on the service itself, and it's embedded in everything else. Now, the cool thing is, and this is what I like about my current position, is that having worked on this for 3-4 years, I understand our systems and our ideas insanely well. This is one of the things that I was missing when I was working at YouTube. I came into YouTube, I immediately had 150-something people. I never had the chance to really understand the infrastructure and the systems that we had. And so every discussion that went a little bit into a technical detail or something, I had to pull in engineers. I'm like, I shouldn't make this decision or even have that discussion. Now I have an insanely good understanding. I can go toe-to-toe with at quite a depth on everything.
Yeah.
So it works to my strength. This is what I like to do. And again, it will allow me to scale much, much better right now. To say, like, look, we can build this. This will take a long time until I have to say, okay, now some team of mine works on something that I literally don't understand anymore.
Mm-hmm. So just another thing, just because you're working on this project and your next stage, what is like is there a general span of how long a project lasts at Google before there's like a cutoff point where it's like you guys have been working on this too long and we haven't actually seen a return on it? Or
no, this is one of the complex things of working at a big company, because there is no sort of standard that you can apply to everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it so depends on the use case, the people that built it. I mean, web search is one of the best examples. There were several attempts throughout the years to build our web search infrastructure from scratch. And yet we're still running on our first generation. I mean, today, probably not one single line of code is the same as it was 10 years ago, but it always evolved. We have other systems that we completely threw away, that we say at some point, like, look, they won't be, I mean, Gmail storage, when I was there, that was one of the big things that we realized, like, look, our storage system, it won't get us to the next stage. So we have to rewrite it from scratch.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, that is a complexity that you have at a company like Google, that there is no standard. You can't just say, okay, here's how we do it. So, and again, that's where it comes back to the director level. These are decisions that we basically have to make. At which point do I say, okay, this effort, yes, maybe it doesn't deliver any longer. We should focus on something else. Or it's done. The use cases may be gone. Or the system needs to be rewritten. Or we do this, but we can evolve into this. That's what my teams rely on me, that I figure this out for them.
Yeah.
That I take care that it happens. I don't have to do this myself. But again, that they know if they work on some next most important thing.
Yeah.
It's really on me if I have a team that at some point everybody realized, like, look, we should have killed this 2 years ago.
Yeah. Cool. We had a load more questions. We're just going to end it there, because otherwise we could be going on for all day. I wanted to say thank you, Mark, for coming. I know you're extremely busy and it's a weekend and it's really early in the morning for you. So thank you so much for coming. You've been great. You've answered a lot of questions. I think everyone's loved having you. It's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you so much. And I think the core team really appreciate it as well. It's helped us a lot. We've all learned a lot, even myself. So thank you. And yeah, stay in touch. It'll be great.
I will. This was fun.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Bye. Cool. So everyone, don't go anywhere. We've got a few more things left. We have an announcement to make on a few more things. So one of the things we mentioned at our introduction event was that we want to do some introduction courses, like a beginner track. And one of the things is people want to learn how to code. Now, a lot of people want to see like something they can show off, right? Something they can show to people. So we're introducing a 2-part live workshop series on how you can, without any coding experience, within 2 weeks, within one session a week as well, in 2 weeks, make a Netflix landing page clone, basically. This is going to be hosted by a company working very closely with called Zayo, and it's a completely free workshop. It will be going live straight after this event. I actually might press the button right now. So if anyone wants to fill in why I press the button, please do, because I'm going to press it. Wait, publish. Is that done? I don't know if it did it. Okay, there's going to be a little awkward silence. Give me a sec. Is it up? Yeah, it's up. Okay, great. I'll be putting the link right now into the chat where you can sign up. It's a 2-part workshop series. So the first part, you'll learn the basics of HTML, CSS, and start developing the basics of the page. And then the second one, you'll go into more advanced work. So workshop 1, you look at HTML tags, anchors, attributes, CSS basics, class IDs, borders, the box model, margins and paddings, all that great stuff. A lot of stuff, learning the basics. And then also you'll be looking in workshop 2 into displays, flexbox, CSS grid, CSS units, media queries, web prefixes, demo coverings, background images, button shapes, structure of the website, transitions to the Netflix landing page, and you'll be able to deploy it so you can put it onto your portfolio CV, something to show off that you've built something. This will be starting on the 4th of November. So the first workshop's the 4th of November at 4 p.m., which is a Wednesday, and the second one is the Wednesday, 11th of November at 4 p.m. And they have told us that if there's enough interest in this, they'll be happy to host another one on a different clone. So basically, get signed up. Can people check if this is up, by the way? I don't want to be advertised. Yeah, it is. Good. Okay. Thank you. So cool. Sign up. We'll keep you updated on the progress, and we can't wait to see you there. We have some other stuff coming up very soon as well, straight after this event. So we're not chilling. We keep going to go with all these, and we know you guys are very interested into AI. So yes. One sec. Cool. So yeah, sign up right now. Basically, there is no limit as of yet. However, they won't take over a certain amount of numbers, so get your name in there early, because this is a closed off workshop, just how they would do it internally at their organization. And like I said at the beginning, your feedback is really important. We've been displaying the secret word throughout the stream. Hope you've been paying attention. Your feedback is really appreciated. We're going to start adjusting these events to you. If you want more speakers like Mark, let us know. If you want to learn some other technologies, let us know. So just scan that QR code, type that link into your browser, and we'll basically start acting on your feedback like we did last time. Anything else from me? I think that's all. Make sure you follow our Instagram. There's a link to our WhatsApp and our Instagram. And if anyone on the core team has anything to say, you guys are all on mute. We can't. But it sounds like a Dalek.
Hashtag robot Raz.
Yeah. So the feedback form link, I'll leave it on the screen for a bit longer. Sorry, just scan that. Let us know what you need changing. One of the things is the time. So we're going to start hosting in the middle of the week as well for the workshops and these guest events. Normally what happen on the weekend when we start doing them because it's easier for the actual guests. How do we sign up to the event? So I put a link back into chat. Go RSVP to that event so we can keep track of your names. And we can send it off to the workshops. It will be streamed to YouTube. You'll get recording of it as well, and then you'll have something to show at your CV. It's very important, very useful. Web development is becoming extremely popular nowadays, so this is a great starting point for all of you. Anyone else got anything to say? Perfect. Thanks for putting that in. So if you guys have nothing to say, I'm going to end it right there. Thank you all for attending. It's been a great event. Mark's been amazing. We hope you all had fun. I'm sorry if we couldn't get your question answered. We tried. There was a lot. We could be going on for hours. But yeah, thank you for attending.
Thank you.
I'm sitting alone, aren't you happy? I don't want you to go, be my baby. It's 5 in the morning and I'm so dazzy. I'm crying alone and I don't want you to go. If I'm crazy, then so are you. Let's not stress this thing, be my midnight rendezvous. The stories don't usually play out like the movies. It might tonight be my midnight rendezvous. I'm crazy in love with you. Tell me that you want me. Tell me what you want me to do. I'm crazy in love with you. Tell me that you want me. Tell me what you want me to do. adore my body. It's 1 a.m. I'll give you around me. I'm crying alone, and I don't want you to go. This story don't usually play out like the movies. It might tonight be my midnight rendezvous. I'm crazy in love with you. Tell me that you want me. Tell me what you want me to do. I'm crazy in love with you. Tell me that you want me. Tell me what you want me to do. Insanely in love with you. Tell me that you need me. Tell me what you need me to do. I'm crazy in love with you. Tell me that you want me. Tell me what you want me to do. Won't you tell what you want me to do? Won't you tell? Won't you?
Año es enero. Año es enero. Año es enero.